And we are going to go very, very, very broad here, right? The quarterback position is one of the more important positions in the NFL. And there's a lot of responsibility by being a quarterback. And as you see at the bottom of the screen, we are going to debate which quarterback is under the most pressure to deliver in 2023. Now, Zach, before I pass the mic to you, I just would like to say when you talk about quarterbacks, man, like there is an immense amount of pressure for any quarterback that is starting week one, regardless to the fact they touch the rock every single play. You know, other guys eat and sometimes you could say get their money because of these quarterbacks and making them look good and giving them opportunities. So, Zach, I'll pass the rock to you to kick us off. Which quarterback is under the most pressure heading into the year?
Yeah, well, so before I give you an answer, I just wanted to say a few things on the overall topic. I kind of thought of this when I was doing our quarterback rankings, right? We're going to be finishing that list today. And while I was doing my list, it really hit me like, wow, there are just a ton of quarterbacks that are under a ton of pressure this year. And if they don't deliver with a successful year on the field, I think there's a good chance that their teams could be going in an opposite direction. I feel like usually in most years, if we were to do a topic like this, it would be a pretty easy answer, right? You would limit like 2 or 3 guys, and a lot of us on the panel, our answer would be the same. But the thing that really appeals to me about this question is I think there are about 5, 6, 7, maybe even more guys that you could look at and say, okay, I think this guy is under the most pressure. And I think you would have a valid argument. You could look at guys like Lamar Jackson, who just signed a huge contract in the offseason. He hasn't been able to stay healthy over the course of the last few seasons. I think that is a very valid option. You could point at Aaron Rodgers, a guy who had his first really down season in a while. He's on a new team in New York. We know how much pressure is on him from the New York market to win and get the Jets back to the playoffs for the first time since 2010. You can look at Dak Prescott, the guy who tied for the most interceptions in the league, had an awful playoff game against San Francisco. Even some of the low-key under-the-radar guys like a Jared Goff, like a Kirk Cousins, how they do this season, it's really going to determine their future for their current franchise. But I listed and ended on really 2 guys that I'm going to put as a possible answer to this question, and I will say who the guy I ultimately think is under the most pressure. But the 2 guys that really stood out to me when answering this question was Deshaun Watson and Russell Wilson. And the one thing that both of these guys have in common is that both of them are going to be entering their second year with their new team after a pretty disastrous first season. And both guys kind of remind me a little bit of the New York Mets on the baseball field in the sense that the Mets brought in 2 Hall of Fame stud pitchers this offseason in Justin Verlander and in Max Scherzer. And there is no doubt when they were at their peak, when they were in their prime, they were Hall of Fame pitchers winning Cy Youngs. The issue is if you don't deliver for the team you're currently on, none of that really matters, right? There aren't really a ton of Denver Bronco fans that care about anything Russell Wilson did with the Seattle Seahawks. They knew he's a good quarterback, but he needs to perform well in Denver in order to do well. The same thing I think could be said for Deshaun Watson in Cleveland. He was very good in Houston, but ultimately none of that matters when it comes to his situation in Cleveland. But the guy I ended up going with was Deshaun Watson. And the reason I put him over Russell Wilson is because I think you can make an argument that there already is a ton of pressure on Sean Payton in Denver, because I've never seen a situation where a head coach was literally brought somewhere just to fix one player in particular, right? We know Denver, they spent a ton of money on Sean Payton. They have a new ownership group that wants to win right away. I think that there's some pressure on Sean Payton off the bat to fix Russell Wilson. Of course, there's a lot of pressure on Russ, but I do think those 2 guys, the spotlight is going to be focused on both of them. The reason really why I ended up going with Deshaun Watson is because A, the money he's making. We know everything that happened off the field, and it's going to be his first full season back in a few years now. I'm curious to see how he does. But my thing with Deshaun Watson was, think about how different the NFL was the last time we saw Deshaun Watson play a full season and he was on the top of his game. You know, just looking at both of us, I was back at SUNY Cortland. I wasn't even living here in New York back at home. So that's one thing, you know, I feel like I have been out of college for a few years now. You have that aspect. And also, I just want to see this guy put it all together. Like the last 2 years, A, he didn't play, and B, he played in 8 games last year, and we all know it ultimately didn't do well. I'm not particularly too high on the Browns, but this team has the overall talent level of a playoff team. We know what they did bringing in Elijah Moore. They have Nick Chubb back, obviously one of the best running backs in the game, a really good offensive line. Their defense should be improved as well. In a loaded AFC, on paper, this Cleveland Brown team should be really good. My only thing is I can't confidently say they will be because I still have a ton of questions on the quarterback. And if this season doesn't go well for Deshaun Watson in Cleveland, I don't really know where the Browns go from here. I do think Denver, there is a situation where you could see them benching Russell Wilson this season if things just don't go well. And Sean Payton, hopefully he's a good enough coach to put them over a top with someone else. But I don't really know what direction Cleveland goes in if it doesn't really work out with Deshaun Watson. And that's why I think he's the QB with the most pressure under him to deliver in 2023.
Yeah, I think you laid out the basics of, when you talk about this topic and how broad it is and how many quarterbacks that you could have thrusted into this category and went with. There's a lot of quarterbacks, and you name a few of them that I forgot in my mind to even mention in my brain when I was going through the list. So it just speaks to a testament that there are a lot of guys more so than ever before upon doing this list, right? I have two guys, and I'm going to go with my number one, and then I'm allow you to respond after I'm done, and then I'll go with who came in second place. Now, number one for me was pretty easy. It was just about the honorable mentions that was really, really tough. I'm going to go Lamar Jackson having the most pressure, this upcoming season. I very well hinted at this on the show. I mean, anytime you give, a guy the largest contract in NFL history, 5 years, $260 million, some of it, half of it guaranteed, and he only, won one playoff game. I believe he's 1-3 in the playoffs, and he missed 11 games the last 2 seasons. I mean, that's a gamble. We talk about what is the biggest gamble of the offseason. I actually thought it was something else, but this was right up here. And the reason why it's a gamble is because we don't really fully know if Lamar Jackson is what you would deem a great quarterback. We deem Lamar Jackson as a great athlete, but is he really a great quarterback? Is he on the same plateau of Patrick Mahomes, of Josh Allen, right? Where is he in a quarterback hierarchy? A lot of people think Jalen Hurts is better than him, but some people think Lamar Jackson is still better than Jalen Hurts. We're going to talk about Jalen Hurts later on the show, but I'll tell you these stats right here, Zach. The passing game ranked number 32, number 30th in passing yards in 2 of the last 3 seasons, in 2020 and 2022 last year. Lamar Jackson threw 8 touchdowns to 10 interceptions with a 73.5 rating in his last 7 games of 2021. 7 touchdowns and 5 interceptions with an 80.7 rating in his last games of last year. Okay, Greg Roman took the 4, obviously, because he was the one that got fired, replaced by Todd Monken. And now Todd Monken is coming into a situation where, he's installing a new philosophy with the team, the X's and O's overhaul, along with the weapons. A lot of the conceptions that was out here was, Lamar Jackson don't got a number 1 wide receiver. Well, you drafted Zay Flowers. You drafted Odell Beckham Jr. Excuse me, you signed Odell Beckham Jr., who won a Super Bowl, who was on his way to winning an MVP of the Super Bowl. And now you give him weapons, but he is learning a new offense while, getting his contract. And so there's going to be a lot of immediate pressure on Lamar Jackson. Another thing, too, that I want to mention before I pass the rock to you, Zach, is that when you reflect back and you talk about John Harbaugh's tenure with the team, the duo of John Harbaugh and Joe Flacco, one thing they did, and you could come at Joe Flacco and his ability, Zay, you could come at, I know Zay watching the show, you could come at John Harbaugh, call him overrated. But one thing Joe Flacco and John Harbaugh did together as a duo was win playoff games. They never was one and done at all together as a duo. They never was one and done. Okay, they didn't go sightseeing in the playoffs. They went to win games. Okay, they beat my Patriots, I believe, twice in that tenure right there. Okay, they gave us the works, and the ones that we won, that we edged them out. I mean, it was very close down to the wire. They won playoff games. When you talk about Lamar Jackson and John Harbaugh as a duo, they have been one and done 3 times. Okay, it's not all on Harbaugh. Lamar Jackson, if you're a great quarterback, show it. All right, I have appreciation for your game and your skill sets, okay, and your athleticism and your ability to take over a game. But at the same time, I'm going to be your harshest critic here because I believe that you can show me something that is better than what you showed me these last couple years, excluding the MVP season that you had. So yes, he's number one for me, undoubtedly.
Yeah, so my main question about Lamar and you putting him as the quarterback under the most pressure to deliver in 2023, what are you looking for, like mainly in particular? What is that one thing you're looking for? Are you looking for him to go out there and have another MVP type season? I know a lot of people have made the argument that, he's kind of fallen off a little bit since that unreal MVP season back in 2019. Are you looking for him in particular to get to the AFC Championship game? Or are you looking for him just to stay healthy over the course of the season? I think what makes Lamar so interesting is even though he got the contract, and I do think he did deserve it, there are some particular benchmarks that you would like to see him see that I'm wondering if it's even possible in this kind of AFC. Let's say the Ravens make the playoffs and they win a playoff game or two, but they fall just short, but he's healthy and could show us that he could stay on the field for a full season. What is the most important thing or the most important factor you're looking at towards Lamar and his play for this upcoming season?
I'm glad you asked that question, Zach, because when you compare the two guys that we picked, Deshaun Watson and Lamar Jackson, I think for me, there's two different expectations that I have for both of these guys. I don't hear nobody calling the Browns a Super Bowl contender. I hear a lot of people calling them underrated. I concur, but I don't see nobody picking them to go to a Super Bowl. Lamar Jackson, he already won an MVP. Two, yes, that's great, added to your resume, but we are looking for that championship. If he wins another MVP, and we're gonna come back and say it's like Jokic almost, even though he didn't win back to back. It's like, all right, you won 2 MVPs. Where's the ring at? Why didn't you win in the playoffs? If you just won an MVP, you were the best player in the regular season. Where's the championship at? So with Lamar Jackson, to me, my expectations is I want to see him win a Super Bowl. That's next up. Jalen Hurts struggled 2 years into the league. He got there last year. Why can't you get there? You know what I'm saying? I understand Jalen Hurts is in the NFC, but if you are a great, great quarterback, it shouldn't even matter, right? If you're on that level of Josh Allen and Patrick Mahomes, you have more weapons than Patrick Mahomes do right now. Respectfully, you do. Josh Allen, mano y mano. So I want to see him win a Super Bowl. With Deshaun Watson, with everything he has went through and how tumultuous last year was, a lot of people are questioning, is he a good football player? If he wins an MVP, hypothetically, I fine, he's let off the hook. He's still a good football player. So there's not a lot of expectations. He won an MVP. He's not bad anymore, right? Even though I don't think he's bad, a lot of people still think he can't play all of a sudden. So if he wins an MVP or enters the discussion, then we are having a different conversation about Deshaun Watson going forward to future seasons. With Lamar Jackson, you already won the MVP. You've been there, done that. Now it's time to win a Super Bowl. And that's where the difference in expectations is for me and why I went Lamar Jackson number one.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, so I'm down to get into Deshaun in 1 second. One last question I'll throw at you for Lamar that I'm kind of on the fence on. Would you feel better about him and the Ravens entering this season if he would have stayed healthy last year and they lost like a close playoff game in the first round to the Bengals, or after what just happened, he just wasn't able to stay healthy or on the field for the second year in a row? Because I'm trying to figure out, like, what is the one thing I'm really looking at for Lamar? Is it winning playoff games for the first time, or is it even just staying on the field? Because my thing is, I understand the Ravens under his tenure at quarterback, they've had some trouble winning in the playoffs, and that wasn't necessarily the case with Joe Flacco, and that's a fair, valid, accurate point. But I just think that Baltimore, they know who their franchise quarterback is of the future. It's Lamar Jackson. They locked him up. And if Baltimore would have felt any differently about that, I feel like they would have traded him. And I feel like if we're going to enter next season with some serious questions about Lamar as the Ravens quarterback this year and of the future, things have to go terribly wrong. And I don't necessarily see that happening. Maybe you do, but I cannot see a scenario where after the season is over, we look at Lamar Jackson and say, shoot, like the Ravens have some serious questions about their future of the franchise at the quarterback position. I feel like for some other guys like Russell Wilson, like Deshaun Watson, I could see a scenario like that, and that's why I put them over Lamar. But I'll give you a chance to respond to that.
Yeah, I think when you talk about Lamar Jackson, obviously Deshaun Watson, he got his money fully guaranteed, more fully guaranteed than Lamar Jackson got. So whether he sucks or not, I mean, you're pretty much good. And I get that point, but I'm not really looking at, okay, he's going to be fine because he got his money. At the end of the day, these two quarterbacks have to deliver, right? And when you talk about Lamar Jackson, I just think there's more questions. You mentioned it, the injury history, the lack of playoff success, combined with can he return to MVP form? So there's so much more questions to me. Like, it's not going to be a situation where he played all 17 games. I'm like, all right, yeah, whoop de do. Yeah, nah. It's like, all right, you played all 17 games, so your team should be good. Your team should win the North. Your team should at least get into the playoffs with a fighting spirit to win these playoff games. Last year in a wild card, you know how I mentioned Joe Flacco and the success that John Harbaugh had with Joe Flacco? Brad Huntley, Tyler Huntley, whatever his name is, I always call him Brett Huntley. I can never get the name right. It's Tyler Huntley, right? He almost won the playoff game, right? They literally was well coached in that game, and nobody talked about it because they lost, right? If Lamar Jackson was in that game, a lot of people think he would have won that game. All right, fine. Next year, when y'all make the wild card, if y'all make the wild card, or if y'all go straight to the divisional round, however y'all season pan out, there's gonna be no more excuses. It's gonna be Lamar Jackson under center. I would hope. Can he win those type of games where the defense is gonna, come to play? They have a good defense. They have a very, very, very good defense on that side of the ball that stepped it up in the second half of last year. I wanted to see Lamar Jackson with that. Right now, he got weapons. Now he got a solid defense that wasn't giving up 30, 40 points in the first half like last year. To be honest with you, I ran out of excuses, and yes, Deshaun Watson, I'm not letting him walk scot-free here. He has a lot to prove and show as well. He got the contract. Everything happened last year. But at the end of the day, I just feel a little bit more confident that I'm going to see Deshaun Watson meet my expectations, which is not really higher than my expectations that I have of Lamar Jackson.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and it's going to be interesting to see also with Lamar, that new offense too. Like, yeah, the weapons are much improved, but we've discussed this a little bit. Like, I could definitely see Baltimore being in that category where their floor is like 6 or 7 wins and their ceiling is maybe 13, 12 wins and the number 1 seed in the AFC. Because if Lamar shows us he's improved as a passer with those weapons, I could definitely see a scenario where Baltimore is one of the better teams in the AFC. But let's
they're banking too. Real quickly, Zach, they're banking on Odell Beckham Jr. staying healthy. I mean, I think that's their true number one when you really look at it. I understand they got Rashad Bateman, Zay Flowers, and Devin Duvernay, who's buried on a depth chart, but Odell is a true number one, and he hasn't been able to sustain longevity on the football field as well. He goes down, and let's say we get injuries every year with the Ravens, first of all. Now you're a couple injuries away from Lamar Jackson going back to being a hero and trying to, run the offense with his legs and everything again. So there's a lot of pressure here with Lamar Jackson for sure.
Mm-hmm. So one other thing about Deshaun Watson, and we could even talk about some of the other guys that just missed the list if you want to get into that. So he had a quote the other day at Browns camp that really stood out to me. He was talking about everything that happened off the field and the fact, the way it affected him and him mentally last year. And he said that it's a lot of the media's doing. The fact that his image and his persona is the way it is right now. It's pretty damaged. And that really turned me off. I don't necessarily say that confidently that this guy has any remorse or has really learned anything from everything that went on last year. I mean, what happened. It's a while ago now. I'm really trying my best to get over it and just really focus on everything this guy has ahead of him in his football career. We know the contract he signed, but when he talks about the media and them being the reason why his image is so damaged and the fact that this whole thing is a narrative, it makes me really concerned. And I mentioned this when he came up in our quarterback rankings. I don't know how you go from being a guy who was one of the most well-liked and respected players in the league. He was literally the face of Clemson football, wins them a national championship over Alabama. You have Dabo Swinney calling him the next Michael Jordan. I find it very difficult going from that guy to literally one of the most hated guys in the NFL, and it was all his doing. And apparently he doesn't necessarily seem to realize that. And I understand that Cleveland, they have a ton of really good talent, right? When you look at Nick Chubb, you look at Amari Cooper, I love Njoku. Like, their defense should be improved. On paper, there's no reason why this Cleveland Browns team shouldn't be really good this year. But in my opinion, it starts at the quarterback position. And I just cannot necessarily say confidently that we're going to see the same guy we saw in Houston 2-3 years ago now. And even during that 2020 season, when Deshaun played probably the best football of his career, his team only won 4 games.
Yeah, I mean, look, you know, when you talk about Deshaun Watson, right, and clearly we're going to talk about, we have like a little superlative about who's the most underrated quarterback in the NFL right now. I'm letting you know off rip. I'm probably not having to say much because I'm going to have to empty it out right now. Deshaun Watson will be that guy for me. The reason why I think he's very underrated in the conversations that we having about, his accountability and everything. And I get that. I understand that, he walked off scot-free, and I understand that whatever happened didn't sit well with a lot of people. It didn't really sit well with me, but I come to accept the fact that this is the NFL. And when I'm watching the NFL, I have to put my moral code aside because there was a lot of things that went on that currently still goes on with the league that I have to turn a blind eye to. Otherwise, I won't be watching the NFL anymore, and I won't be doing this podcast anymore. So the fact of the matter is, I have to watch the NFL because that's my number one sport, and that's the bread and butter of this show. And we're going to keep the show moving. So I have to ignore and put certain things to the back burner and keep everything football related. And I don't think what happened last year with the media is going to play a factor this year. I mean, with all the talent, in the AFC, with all the good games that we have, with all the battles, who was thinking about that? Who was thinking about Deshaun Watson and what he did anymore? Right? We are going to be looking at these games. We're going to get games on Monday, Thursday, Saturday in December, Black Friday. Right now, that's on the back burner. Unfortunately, that's the reality of the situation. I don't think Deshaun Watson will be affected by that. Now, my thing here is that I don't think people or really giving him credit enough to even be a game manager. Like last year, when you look at Jacoby Brissett and his success with the team, he's not an elite quarterback. We know that. Okay. But he was at least a game manager last year who led a top 10 scoring offense. You mean to tell me Deshaun Watson, who threw for 4,000 yards without no number one wide receiver, who was looked upon as a top 5 quarterback, arguably right in there with Mahomes, cannot even be a game manager on a good team that's very underrated on both sides? Like, now I don't see that. I think he could at least, at worst, be a game manager. I understand you're not paying him, all that money, 260 fully guaranteed to be a game manager, but at the very least, that's better than last year. And I think he will be just above that game manager label, which is why he's in my top 10, because I think he will show flashes of that greatness that we saw prior to everything that we were talking about right now.
Yeah, I mean, you said it, though. A game manager for a guy you're paying that much money to? I mean, you're in the AFC. The reason why the Browns got Deshaun Watson, I thought, was to go toe-to-toe with some of the best quarterbacks in the conference, like a Mahomes, like a Burrow. By the way, Bengals at Browns week 1. I'll be really looking forward to that game. One of the best games on the slate right off the bat, so that should be good in the NFC North. But, man, AFC North, but, man, you're paying this guy to go toe-to-toe with those guys, and now we're saying, oh, he could be a game manager? That's great? Like, come on. Should the ceiling be a little higher?
I mean, look, and that's my last point. You got Nick Chubb on that roster. He's the number 1 back in the league right now. I call him a superstar running back. He's always going to get you 4 or 5 yards a pop. Yeah, I mean, you could run your offense through Nick Chubb, and still be a game manager. Like, game managers, as long as you win games, as long as Deshaun Watson win games, I don't care how he does it. I don't care if it's off his athleticism and ability and improvisation and freestyle play. I don't care if it's Nick Chubb scoring not 5 touchdowns. Obviously, that's not going to happen, but like 2 to 3 touchdowns a game or 100 plus yards carrying the football. I don't care what it is. As long as they're winning games and Deshaun Watson is not giving away games, then, hey, I think they will still have a chance to compete. And Zach, there's one quarterback that came in number 2 for me, right? And you mentioned a lot of quarterbacks when you kicked off, but you didn't mention this guy. I'm going to go with Mac Jones at number 2. I mean, look, I know right? When it's all said and done, I know Deshaun Watson and Lamar Jackson is going to be the starting quarterback for their respective teams this season after next season, right? In 2024. But what I do not know is if Mac Jones is going to be the starting quarterback for the New England Patriots in 2024. Better yet, finishing the year this upcoming season. I don't know. Because last year he was benched for Bailey Zappi. Okay. And listen, I think Mac Jones is a solid quarterback, right? I don't think he has a ceiling like most of these dual threat guys have. And it's very possible that we have probably saw his best in that year where they made the playoffs in his rookie years. I mean, his rookie season, maybe his peak right there. And I get all that. But you got to give this guy a shot. The fact that they did not bring D Hop is embarrassing to the organization. And I just don't think that Mac Jones could overcome Bill Belichick's cheap spending. You know, in this NFL present day, you're going to have to spend money. You can't be cheap and economize your economic resources in today's NFL, where there's a lot of talented quarterbacks, a lot of talented wide receivers, a lot of talented running backs, right? And I just think he's at a disadvantage. So last year, Bill Belichick kind of penalized him for his own mess by benching him. And it didn't help that Mac Jones was suffering from injuries that plagued him throughout the year. This year is a very, very, very big year for Mac Jones. He got the offensive coordinator in Bill O'Brien, who is known upon the league as one of the best coordinators in the NFL. Yes, he doesn't have a lot of weapons. He have Juju, you know, but he's gonna have to make a do with Juju because he could be on the bench. He could be riding the bench by the end of the year. And better yet, maybe Robert Kraft moves on for this guy. And we have to realize, too, and one more point, that Bill Belichick's job could be tied into Mac Jones' performance as well. So don't think a guy like Bill Belichick is going to sit there and allow Mac Jones to lose at the expense of his gig. Bill Belichick will bench him for Bailey Zappi in a heartbeat. Okay, so Mac Jones definitely has a lot of pressure. And when you look at the quarterbacks in the division, or let's say the talent on these four teams in the division, the Patriots have the worst talent, but they do have a good defense, which is why they probably win 8 or 9 games, which is actually going to expose the offense even more because they're going to be in a lot of games they play, and it's going to be like, all right, Mac Jones, what are we doing here? So, yeah, Mac Jones definitely was number 2 for me, and I was fine with putting him number 2. I didn't have no threats for that spot.
Interesting, very interesting. So a few thoughts on New England. I do think that offseason of 2021, when Bill Belichick very uncharacteristically spent a bunch of that money on Nelson Aguilar and Jonnu Smith and Hunter Henry, like weapons, but no real guys that really moved the needle. I think we could be looking back at that offseason as something that really cost the Patriots because we know New England, they wanted to sign DeAndre Hopkins. They just weren't really willing to spend that extra $5-6 million that he was looking for, that Tennessee was really going to offer him. That's why he didn't end up coming. And I do think their offense should be better, right? You mentioned O'Brien, Juju. They also bring in Mike Gesicki, a pretty solid tight end. Stevenson at running back. Like, they have some capable guys. But my thing with Mac Jones is I think you could win with him. You just need to surround him with really good weapons and really good coaching around him. I still think, like, I know taking him at number 3 might have been a little bit of a reach, but he would have been a better pick for the 49ers than Trey Lance. I think him with Kyle Shanahan in that system with all the weapons around him, like a place like that, that would be the perfect destination. But hey, Bill Belichick, we know his future in New England. It's in question. I think what makes New England so interesting to me is that Robert Kraft, he's expecting immediate results. He knows how much winning this franchise did with Tom Brady. And if New England doesn't get to the playoffs, let alone win a playoff game or two, I definitely think things could start getting really interesting really quickly when it comes to both the quarterback and the head coach.
Absolutely, Zach. I mean, we pretty much laid it out. You know, Aaron Rodgers was definitely a high thought in this category as well. I thought about going him. The reason why I didn't go with him was not mainly because of like his situation, but mainly because of the things that I talked about with the 2 guys that I chose. I just thought it was just more glaring. But I will say that he rose and shot up to the point where he almost was one of those 2 guys I would have went with. like he shot up the most because like there's a lot of hype with the Jets right now. You see them on Hard Knocks coming up, right? You see a lot of their highlights because they started camp first. So right now they are being under the microscope a little bit more. They are the New York Jets. It's a big market. So yes, we know that they're going to be under a microscope with all the primetime games they have and all that. But like it's just different when it hits you and you're realizing that, you look in the chat and my guy Zach and Zay and Coach is out here, calling out Jets holidays, happy Jets holiday. I mean, when you have friends that really, really believes that Aaron Rodgers is going to be a top 5 quarterback, you sit there with grief, in a sense, because you realize that your boy is about to be heartbroken because I don't see him being a top 5 quarterback this year, with all due respect. Now, I did think about pushing him in my top 10 when I did my quarterback rankings. I have him number 11. I think he's going to be right below that, but I still think he will be good. But I just think they're a little bit too hypeness over here. Like, I don't really think the NFL is a movie. And as much as I like movies, I don't consider the NFL to be a movie. If the NFL was a movie, my Patriots would have went undefeated that year in 2007. Okay, if the NFL was a movie, we would have went undefeated. That was the perfect script right there. All right, just won the table. It didn't happen, right? So, the AFC East is tough. We're gonna talk about that obviously later on. And I thought about putting the Jets there. Aaron Rodgers, he put his legacy on the line. All right, he went to a bigger market than the Green Bay Packers in a harder division. He put his legacy out there, all right, to be ostracized or to be held, right? So we'll see if we're gonna be healing his legacy after this upcoming season.
Absolutely. And in case anyone's coming over the show late, we'll be unveiling our top 5 quarterback list a little bit later in the show. I will mention Aaron Rodgers in that, so I'll give most of my thoughts there. But one last guy I wanted to hit on before we move on to the next segment is Russell Wilson. Like, we have to talk about him at least a little bit, right? Like I said it earlier. Like, do you ever remember a single coach being brought into a team to just fix one player in particular? That's Sean Payton with the Denver Broncos and Russell Wilson right now. Like, he literally was brought in to fix one player, and that's their quarterback, Russell Wilson. And I was pretty down on Denver going into last year. I believe you were as well. None of us were really surprised about like how their season went, but I don't think anyone was necessarily expecting it to be this bad. And I do think like if Sean Payton is able to turn Russ around just a little bit, this Denver team could be a playoff team. Their defense was really good last year. One of the best defenses in the league. We know about the weapons they have. We've been waiting for their wide receivers to break out. Their offensive line should be much improved, which I think is very important. How close were you to moving Russell Wilson towards the top of your list? Because that was the one guy for me, other than Deshaun, that really stuck out.
To be honest, before the show, not close. I didn't even think about him. Like, I didn't even look at his way. But when you brought it up, I was like, yeah, Russell Wilson could be in this category. It's just, to me, if I could break this down, right? Russell Wilson, I really don't have the same expectations that I had, about him before. Like, I think I've been very, like, vocal on the record, his last year in Seattle, that I don't believe he got it. I believe I said that plenty of times on the record. I just don't believe he is there. I don't believe he has that same pop. Ever since me and you, Zach, had that famous debate about who was the midway MVP, and I went on a tangent, defending Russell Wilson, and then the next game he threw 4 interceptions. After that, I was completely done with this guy. Okay, one thing that I didn't like at that time, now like I'm cool with it. I understand we're gonna have debates that's gonna flop, and we're gonna look stupid at times on the show. Right, I'm more accustomed to it now. Like I'm fine with that. Back then, I didn't want to. I didn't like looking stupid, and he made me look stupid. So when he came to Denver last year, I was like, yeah, it was more like I told you so. Like, I didn't think it was gonna be that bad. Don't get me wrong. Like, I didn't think it was gonna get to that point, but it wasn't a lot of expectations. Now this year with Sean Payton, I think I was more closer to putting Sean Payton in the next subtopic that we have, which non-quarterback is under the most pressure. Like, Sean Payton actually came in number 2 for me in that category. More so, I was actually looking Sean Payton's way because of, can you fix him? Can you fix it? So it's not about really Russell Wilson anymore. It's about what Sean Payton could bring out of Russell Wilson now. So that's why I didn't look that way. But Russell Wilson does have a lot to prove to a lot of people that, all right, he wasn't a byproduct of Pete Carroll's system. Look at Geno Smith. If Geno Smith continues to rise, he had a good year last year. If that good year becomes great in 2023, and Russell Wilson cannot even match that with the weaponry he has and the coach that he has, then it's obviously a problem that we are going to remember Russell Wilson for, and not the good things that we used to adore.
All right, well, before we move on to the next topic, we have some breaking news. And I think this breaking news literally could not be more perfect based on what we're talking about and the fact that we're talking about the elite quarterbacks. We're just finishing up our quarterback list. But the Chargers and Justin Herbert have agreed to terms on a massive 5-year, $262.5 million contract, making him the highest paid quarterback in the NFL. He is now making $52.4 million a year. I never thought I'd see a day where the Chargers hand out a contract like this, but good for them, keeping their guy there long term.
Listen, Justin Herbert, well deserved, right? Literally, he has single-handedly kept this organization functionable. You subtract him from the team, I'm looking at the Chargers as a dysfunctional franchise, and I still kind of look at them that way. But when you have a quarterback like Justin Herbert and what he can do, all the skill sets he has, the arm he has, is well deserved. We know how the quarterback market works. Obviously, it's going to continue to go up. Joe Burrow is next. I really felt that they were kind of, how can I say, it's like, all right, who will get paid first, because we know the other one may top that. So Joe Burrow should be happy that Justin Herbert got taken care of first, because that means more money in his purse. But yes, very good deal for Justin Herbert. 5-year, $262 million contract, tops Lamar Jackson, and it should. He's top 5 in the NFL. So yes, well deserved. I'll leave us with that.
And by the way, now Patrick Mahomes is the 8th highest paid quarterback in the NFL, behind Herbert, Lamar, Hurts, Rodgers, Russell Wilson, Kyler Murray, and Deshaun Watson. Mahomes still has 9 years left on his contract. So I remember when the Chiefs gave out that contract, it looked like a pretty big number at the time, but now all of a sudden there are 8 guys ahead of him. Pretty crazy stuff.
Yeah, I mean, nobody completed more passes the last 3 years, in his first 3 years, than Justin Herbert. So they believe in him. You know, it's kind of reminiscent real quickly here of the Lamar Jackson situation, right? You pay him, you get him a coordinator, right? And you open things up. Now it's the same thing happening with Justin Herbert. You pay him, you give him Kellen Moore to open things up.
I think with this contract and Lamar's contract as well, like that's what it's going to come down to. If you're going to, when we're discussing this topic 5 to 10 years, which team got the better investment out of their quarterback contract, it's going to be the team that wins more. And that pressure is ultimately going to be on both guys.
Absolutely.
Please like and subscribe for all the up-to-date content. You've been slinging shows left and right, slinging content left and right. Please don't miss anything. If you do, like, subscribe, leave a comment, or leave a question, something you may want to answer, something you may have. All ideas are great ideas. Nothing's a dumb question.